This video is sponsored by Bandai Namco and their new game, Bleach: Rebirth of Souls.
All right, you guys asked for it. Another big giant sword. I hope you guys enjoy.
That's right, big giant swords are back, baby, and today we're gonna be making the most requested sword from Bleach from all time. Well, you guys know exactly what sword we're making because you clicked the thumbnail to get here, but today we are gonna be making the Zangetsu Shikai from Bleach: Rebirth of Souls.
Most of the times the audience takes big giant sword as a test of skill. It really isn't a test of skill. It is a test of patience and good work practices. Once you have a big mass of steel that is this size, it acts like a lens radiating heat towards you, and it's easy to forget just how much heat is being directed at you. So at a certain point in the forging, I had to put an apron because the infrared light coming from the steel was burning my knees underneath my pants. So these little details is something you have to be very well aware of. The first time I actually encountered this phenomena of the lensing of infrared directed at me was not even a sword, it was a shield. And a shield is basically a lens mirror. So everything was fine when I was heat treating a shield, but once it turned onto me, directing all the heat at me as a lens, that's when I really felt it. After working on the power hammer with steel for so many years, you can just tell how much material you need in order to produce an object of a given size. So for example, before starting this, Matt gave me a bunch of bars of tool steel, and we had an argument like, you need this much, I told him you need this, so on and so forth. And the reason is, once you work enough, you train your eye to know exactly how much material you need, to what heat it has to get to before it goes to the power hammer, and depending on the material, what heat is dangerous to not destroy the structure of the material inside.
Throughout the years, on all the different YouTube channels we've done work on, Ilya and I have debated and planned on doing a Bleach build for quite some time. It just, for one reason or another, never happened. And funny story, the first video that really went viral for us back in the MySpace days, if you can call it viral back then, was actually making this exact sword from Bleach. And what we did is we made a short video of chopping a watermelon, and we chopped the watermelon with it. We went all the way through and into a stump and split the stump. It was a very short video, but that was long before we ever did anything on YouTube. And it's kind of cool to return to this sword, do it the right way. That was a stage combat version, so a blunt sword made for a convention called MetroCon in Florida that did big giant stage combat theatrical shows with different video game characters and anime characters all on one stage. And they wanted the giant sword from Bleach. So it's just really cool for me personally to go full circle and go back to the big giant sword that started it all, and to make the Zangetsu Shikai from Bleach, and in this case, the new video game, Rebirth of Souls.
When broken down into simple terms, this entire project is just a big kitchen knife. So I'm going to approach the sword the same way I approach making normal sized kitchen knives, except this time I'm going to start out with 40 pounds of steel. In order to be more efficient, I have to make a bunch of top tooling for the power hammer. Otherwise, we're going to be here for another 2 months because Matt can't swing a sledgehammer for shit. The main difficulty with making these big objects is at a certain point, your object is bigger than your power hammer die and sometimes bigger than the surface of your anvil. And the common mistake that will happen eventually is that you will hit where the bottom die or the anvil isn't. And you can hurt your project very quickly and possibly place yourself in danger. So the bigger the object gets, the slower you have to start forging because you don't want to either hurt yourself or hurt the main item you're trying to make. The surprising part about mythology and myth creation is that big giant weapons don't really emerge into their full popularity until the modern times, the times where we live in, let's say after 1950s onward, and especially they start emerging in the late 20th century up till now. So just like with this project, the sword is essentially what I have here, a kitchen knife, but gigantic. And this tendency goes on in video games, anime, even Marvel, and so on. I suspect why this happens is because the social context for the consumer of the media has radically changed. While as before, in the Renaissance medieval era, there was no notion of the big bureaucracy, big society out there where you feel small and meaningless. Now, that's the case. The forces you're fighting are not bears in the woods. The forces you're fighting are not constant feudal lords attacking you and demanding more taxes. What happens now is you go to the DMV and someone prevents you from getting that license. You go try to pay your taxes, you did it wrong. It's always the big institution. And the sublimated desire of feeling important and feeling powerful transfers itself into the media where the hero has to have the biggest, most giant sword that no one else can lift, and that you suppress yourself with super heavy armor, and you have to take off that armor to be even more powerful because you're so strong. So it's the covered desire, the feeling of thinking that you are so much stronger than what the world allows you to be, that is expressed in comic books, anime, video games. And when we look back, that was not how swords usually, with the exception of a few myths, were shown. If you're making a sword of any size, but especially something on the larger side, warping is really something that will interfere with you. And most of you who tried this have noticed that things that look straight start warping as they cool off. One of the reasons is, let's imagine that this is my sword, doesn't matter what size, and it's sitting on the anvil like that. You finish forging it, it looks straight, and then as it's sitting on the anvil, it sags and gets this really nice, ugly curve. The reason for that is you have gravity pushing on it this way and this way, but the anvil is pushing on it this way. As a result, as it cools off, it tries to settle and equalize the forces, and the tip starts going this way, and the tank starts going this way. That's one of the reasons. The other reason is heat goes up, so cold air blows on your object from the bottom, and hot air leaves it. Means that this side cools off a little bit faster than the side on top. And as it shrinks, and as things cool off, they shrink, it creates this nice band that like bedevils you in the middle of the night and that you can't get rid of. So the best thing to keep your forging straight is to suspend them this way in the air by hanging. If you suspend them this way in the vise, it will still try to move with gravity up and down. So this is one of the things that really shows itself when your sword is gigantic or super long, because there's just more heat mass circulating through the air, through your material.
The vast majority of the time that Ilya and I have been working together, well over a dozen years, we've been known as the Big Giant Sword Guys, and that's fair. I mean, what you guys know us from, for the most part, is videos on YouTube, TV shows, all kinds of things like that, making things that you guys request, and more often than not, what's requested is some sort of big giant sword. I'm not quite convinced that you all just wanted to see those made because they're your favorite. Sometimes I think it started with you trying to stump us. And with that, the beginning of the motivation for us to do these projects in a very serious manner, making them as good as we can using proper techniques forging and grinding, even though they're big and giant, was to kind of prove ourselves, you know. We're not gonna get stumped, and starting off, we took over a show that somebody else, Tony Swatton, was doing, and we got quite a bit of vitriol. People were upset that their favorite show had switched cast on them. So we really started off trying to prove ourselves, but it grew into something much more than that. It grew into the understanding that now we have developed people who are watching our show because they enjoy us, and we developed fans, and we realized that we really were bringing to life items from people's favorite video games, stories, whatever it was, fantasies, if you will, to life. We were bringing those things to life, and it meant a lot to some people. Other people just tuned in to see the forging, but some people really cared about the subject matter. And even if it was something that we didn't necessarily care about ourselves, we always knew that that was super important to at least a handful of people out there. So we always took it really serious. And even though making big giant swords isn't exactly our favorite thing to do these days, we know it's what most of you know us from. And it's kind of funny not being known for the actual original artwork that you make. But nonetheless, we still return to the big giant builds once or twice a year.
Making this, we're not limited by me or the power hammer. The power hammer will hit no matter what. Since it's a fairly common shape for me to forge, I can make it in any size. Our limitation for this project was the forge. We originally planned on building a bigger forge just for this project, but the time didn't line up fairly well. So the way we approached it is as soon as the sword stopped fitting into the forge, that's when we stopped the forging, and that's the size of the project.
Up until this point in the project, it's been my job to film Ilya forge his blade. I'm the guy behind the camera, but I also have a secondary job, and that's pretty much to be on standby for Ilya. Anytime he needs the hand to hold the material where it's just too long under the power hammer, or sometimes to pick up a sledge, move material around, or sometimes just to straighten things.
Hey, grinding, it's what I do. I don't really have to think about it all that much, especially when Ilya takes so much care in forging the blade almost to shape. I'm basically just going to take all the little bumps around the perimeter out, refine the shape to make it look more like in the anime, and then just prep it for heat treat. After the heat treat is where the real task begins of grinding that super wide edge. And I'm not really looking forward to that.
You might be thinking that grinding a blade this big must be a pain in the butt. And to be honest, you'd be right. But I much rather have this job than having to be the one who heat treats a blade like this. Just having so much time in the forging so far and just the sheer size of it, there's just so much that could go wrong.
For this project, as well as any project of similar size, we usually pick either water quenchable tool steels or air hardening steels. One of the reasons is it's pretty much unsafe with our setup to quench a blade of 40-pound weight into oil, simply because of the flash point of the oil, and we don't want to have the shop catch on fire and have all our oil ruined. So we prepared our regular katana quenching tank and heat up the sword in the kiln. The reason why we choose the kiln is because since it's so wide, any unevenness from the edge to spine in the heating can cause tremendous warping that we cannot fix later on. So using a kiln is way more efficient in our case. The forge work itself is not really the most grueling part of making a big giant sword. Because when you're forging, you're kind of active, you're moving here, you're moving there, you're picking things up, so it's not super stressful. Now, when I hand over the blade to Matt, all he does is this for hours and hours, taking breaks, looking at some videos of puppies, then going back to grinding. And it's really the repetitive part of covering a lot of surface area that is very heavy, that is very, very repetitive, that takes a big toll on the craftsman in making these things.
So I gotta be honest with you guys, when I first planned out how I was going to grind this sword, I planned on doing what everyone else you see on YouTube who's made a sword or a sword like this has done, and that is basically get the edge really close, then use some tape and mask off the edge, and then most people you see paint, but I was just gonna use some bluing compound on the black part, leaving the other part bright, and a really definitive edge line between the dark sword flat and the bright sword edge. But after watching Ilya forge this piece to such great care, basically forging it to its final shape, I decided I was gonna internally challenge myself to actually grinding this edge how I would on a normal knife edge. Like literally do the techniques that I would do on a sword blade or on a knife blade to make it as clean of a definitive edge between those kind of wrought iron pieces and the bright edge. What ended up happening is the grind job that should have taken basically a day, maybe a day and a half, ended up taking 4 days. Really took a toll on my body. Like as I'm sitting here recording this, the day after we finished the build, my muscles on my chest and my arms and my back, they're just killing me, as if I did the same workout routine 4 straight days, which everybody knows you take some breaks. But the final result is well worth it. I mean, I'm really happy with this. I was even challenging myself to grind it. I still thought, I'm probably gonna end up slipping. I'm probably gonna have to go up and mask it off. But it's so good in the actual anime and in the video game. It's usually, sometimes it's a little bit of a faded line, but most of the time it's a real black and white definitive line. In reality, these usually have a bit of a transitional area, and that's what you see here, but it is a really good crisp line, and I'm really happy with it, and I hope that you guys are happy with the decision I made to both challenge myself and leave it naturally how it is after the grinding and a little bit of hand sanding.
Having made so many projects for this and other channels, big video game projects or historical items, created a whole system, a mental procedure in approaching every single build, and consequently, depending on the distribution of roles, a set of complementary approaches and opinions on this or the other project. And that really shows in the end result.
I'll show it to you. Ready?
Once again, we really want to give a big shout out to Bandai Namco for sponsoring this video. Be sure to check the link in the description to download the new game, Bleach Rebirth of Souls. Anybody who's a fan of the anime is absolutely gonna love playing this game. And as always, we ask you to like this video, comment down below what you want to see us build next, and if you haven't, consider subscribing to this channel. That works. Check out more videos right here.